Hey everyone, so in this video we're going to talk about the most common accidentals and a few conventions about how they're written once we actually get to putting them into music notation. So I'm going to start by actually going to musictheory.net and grabbing that pop-up piano. So tools, pop-up piano, and I'm just going to put that guy over there and close that out. Love this thing, it's so useful. And I'm going to put it on the mark setting so that I can draw some dots. Okay, so we've probably heard of sharps and flats, but we have a few new symbols here. You can think of accidentals as operating on sort of a spectrum. So if you think of natural as being the start point or center, and when you look at music notation, you may or may not see the natural symbol. So a note without any accidental is also called a natural. But you may see one on there, and we'll see why we use them pretty soon. But if we think of natural as the center, as the start point, I'm going to mark a C. So that's just a C note. So that means that's C natural. Now sharp, we should know by now, means go up 1/2 step. So that's raising this note up by 1. So C sharp would be there. And C flat would be down 1. So that's this symbol, the lowercase looking b. So C natural, lowered by 1. Raised by a 1/2 step with a sharp, lower by a 1/2 step with a flat. And a double sharp is same idea, only we move 2 places instead of 1. So double sharp means move to the right or higher in sound if you're not using a piano, but on other instruments. For instance, a guitar, it would be 2 frets up higher. So 2 frets higher, we'd raise by 2 frets, or 2 keys higher on the piano, and that gives us a double sharp. So we're just sharping twice. So remember, a sharp is to go up by a 1/2 step, so doing that twice makes a double sharp. And same concept for double flats. Double flat is down 2. All right, so 1, 2. So C double flat is here. Now you don't see double sharps and double flats very often, but they're useful and they're definitely an important part of the system. So that's how they work, right? Either raising 1/2 step or raising 2, or lowering 1/2 step and lowering in 2. Now, when it comes to actually writing them into notation, it's really important that we stick to a couple of conventions. So if you're doing this in a music notation program, you don't have to worry about it. It's always going to do it correctly. But when we're handwriting, we need to remember that the sharp or any other accidental needs to come before the note that it's being applied to. So it's really sharp the C when the musician reads. Otherwise, the musician might be tempted to play this and then think about the sharp, right? Which would mean they played C and then went, uh-oh, that was supposed to be sharped. So the right way to do it is to write it with the sharp in front of the note head. So give that extra instruction before they actually see the note. So that's really important. The next thing to be aware of is the vertical placement of the accidental. So when we place a flat, for instance, you'll notice that the circular part or the rounded part of the flat occupies the exact same place that the note head will. So this is really important. The flat could actually be read, in this case as a C, without even having the note there, right? I would know that that flat is belonging to the C because it's on that space. And if it's on a line, that line, just like through the note head, it will go directly through the center of the flat. So the flat can operate almost like a note can. And that's really important when it comes to writing key signatures, is you have to be aware that an accidental can actually signify which letter it's on by its placement on the staff, just like a note head can. So notice for a flat, the oval part of the flat always sits right in front of the note that you want to apply the flat to. For the sharp, it's the central rectangular area lines up. So you'll notice note head on the space, box on the space. Note head on the line, box immediately on the line. For the natural, it's also the boxy section of the natural that will line up with the note head. For double flat, it works just like a regular flat. So the oval rounded part of the flat symbols, there's just 2 of them, right? Go right in the same space or on the same line as the note you want to apply it to. And then the double sharp is especially easy because X marks the spot, right? So it looks like an X, a double sharp, and it goes right inside the space or cut exactly in half by the line, just like the note heads do. Finally, let's look at a few things about accidentals once we're actually looking at a real piece of music that happened that are the main point for confusion for my students. So the way sharps and flats work is that they change a note a little bit in a piece of music. And usually when this happens, it happens for a long period of time. So once you start seeing D sharps like we have here in a piece of music, you're going to keep seeing them over and over again. So the system is set up so that we have to do minimal notation, minimal reminders of the fact that a note has been changed. So the rule is once this D has been sharped, it's like an on switch. It stays on the next time you see D. Another reason for leaving out that secondary sharp, you can already see it here. It already is starting to look busy and kind of confusing to your eye, seeing sharp and then sharp again, right? It looks much cleaner the earlier way, right? Sharp and then have the musician just remember it's still on. It's an on switch. So there are a few ways to turn an accidental off once that on switch has been put on. Another place for confusion for my students often is they think that this sharp somehow applies to another note in the measure. Remember, it sits only on the line of the note that it applies to and therefore has nothing to do with this note on this space. The accidental only affects the note on the line or space that it's placed on. So this is D sharp, this is just E. This is D sharp again because the sharp is still on for that line. One way to turn this off is if you cross over a bar line, this D will now be back to normal or whatever the key signature has set it to, which we'll talk about later. But for our purposes here, this is the reset button, right? So that you cross over the bar line, we have D sharp, it's still D sharp here. We cross the bar line, everything resets back to normal. Another way to do it is to force the accidental to change by placing an accidental on it. That includes the natural, but any new accidental will do this. So if I have a sharp on here and I want the sharp to become D flat, I can just put the new accidental there and that overrides what happened before. So I have D sharp, D flat, cross the bar line, normal, natural D here, right? So sharp, overridden by D flat, bar line resets, regular D. And then the natural allows us to go back to normal. So sharp, D sharp, if I want to go back to normal D before the bar line, I need to put this natural symbol here, this boxy natural symbol, which if you're handwriting it is an upside down 7 and a right side up 7 that meet on their edges there. So that's an easy way to draw it. Upside down 7, right side up 7. Cool, and that's about it. So just remember, if you see a note that's sharped and then you see that note again without anything on it, know that it's still sharp. So anytime you see two notes in a row and the first one has an accidental applied, it applies to all the following notes to the right until you've turned it off somehow with a natural, with another symbol, or with the bar line. Okay, that's it. Hope that all makes sense. I'll see you in the next one.